we were in what the area was called the Algonquin tribes, which is a kind of a group of tribes similar to the Iroquois, though not quite as well established as a confederation. They were in flux. When Christopher Columbus came over in the late 1400s, it was almost 1600 before there were any efforts to colonize the country. Does anybody realize everybody wonder why there was a gap in there of 100 years? The American Indian population was greater than that of Europe. Cahokia was a city outside of St. Louis. It was bigger than London, it was bigger than Paris. It was one of the biggest country or biggest cities in the world at the time. It was 3 square miles. The population of the Indians was so great that when you read about from the early discoverers and explorers, when they came ashore, they were met by thousands of Indians, not dozens and hundreds, but thousands. They were very intimidated by that, and most of the tribes did not want them out there. So you come to shore, you trade, you left. So that's why there was no settling for the first 100 years to the Indians. Europeans are a little low in their ethics, and they brought over smallpox and cholera. They gave it to them. They knocked the Indian population down between 80 to 90% is what they estimate. So when Europeans came over to settle, Jamestown came, most of them were gone. And that's why you see, let's see, I'm kind of lost my track, I'm sorry. But one of the factors that really helps go along with that is passenger pigeons. When Europeans came over, a huge amount of passenger pigeons would block the sky. Well, according to the Indians, they kept them down in numbers. They were the Indians that populated our country, or our area, in the late 1400s, 1500s. They were all agricultural people. They had big fields. They lived by agrarian society, not so much the hunting, but they hunted anything that moved. They ate anything that moved. So they kept things down because they didn't really want a whole herd of deer wandering through their cornfields, eating up like we have now. They kept them down. It's estimated there was possibly 3 deer per square mile when the settlers came over. They figured it was less than that before 1492. So that's what allowed things to them to have their large fields and be able to stockpile their grains so they could see themselves through the winter. Now the tribes ebbed and flowed. They would move as circumstance allowed. If a tribe had a bad year and their population got decimated, possibly by disease, by famine, or anything like that, another tribe would move into it, so that they were always in flux. If you look at the history of some of the old tribes, they talk about being from different areas from where they are when the Europeans came in. Then when the Europeans came in, they moved everything, they started pushing everything back, and all the Indians started moving back away from them. So then they're in flux again. The tribes that were in favor with English, they stayed close to us. The ones that are in favor of France went towards France, or to Canada. So they were always in flux. So it's really difficult to say what tribe was where. No one really knows who was here before 1492 because things changed so greatly in the 100 years following that. Anyways, that's being a bit of the history. I know I kind of dance around. I'm not a very polished speaker. I apologize for that. I say things that comes to my mind. We hunted our camps. We looked for areas that you would camp in. They camped in a place where they needed the 3 things they really needed. They needed water, they needed shelter, and they needed a place to be able to grow their food. So they mainly were along stream bottoms. However, most of your trails followed your ridge tops, and they stayed close to springs. Springs are generally found up on top of the hills and along the ridges. That way, your trails would be on your ridge tops more like than they would be along the streams. Streams would be your local, we want to call them the county roads, the local roads. But your highways or throughways were up on your ridges. They could travel that way. Trade could go through without going through villages and having possible problems. Rules there amongst the Indians, according to your early explorers, were rather lax. The only thing they really kept was, you had to be honest, you had to be powerful, you had to be strong, and you had to be forthright with all your things, no lying, no anything like that. And also if you had something that they wanted, possession was 9/10 of the law. You could come in the village, you could come in peacefully, you may not leave. They decide you had something you wanted. So if you're trading, you want to be able to go, didn't want to go through the villages, you wanted to stay away from them, but still go places. One of the big things that we have as a draw close by us was the rhyolite quarry up at Blue Ridge Summit. There's where most of these arrowheads and materials from those came from. Not really sure, never really read how that was, what the jurisdiction there was of that. Most likely it was a neutral territory that all tribes in the area could come get their materials and leave. Otherwise it would have been rather difficult to, for one tribe to be able to keep it. But that was a very, very big draw for this area. Most of our arrowhead points came from material from that quarry there. And that quarry is still visible. I've never been there. My father went there a couple times to see it. But that's where they got most of their material, the rhyolite. Once, my dad knew a lot of people, and he got word of someone clearing a field over back of Legor's Bridge. He said, you need to go there. Well, it was a Sunday afternoon, so we packed up, hopped on that old Honda 90, and away we went. We got there, it was a couple hours before dark. We walked over the hill, and you could see the outline of the village. The camp was there. You could see the outline of the longhouse, you could see the outline of the stockade, and you could see the old fire pits. My dad debated greatly on whether to pack up then, go home, get camera and take pictures, or hunt arrowheads then, because he knew they were going to plow the next day. We hunted arrowheads. We found over 100 arrowheads in 2 hours. Yeah, they were just all over the place. Huh? Louder. Oh, I'm sorry. Is people having troubles? Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't paying attention. Anyways, we found over 100 arrowheads in about 2 hours. We hunted till it was so dark we couldn't see anymore. But that showed, it was really interesting there. You could see the outline of what the camp and the village was. The house itself was about 40 to 50 feet long. It was about 20 feet wide. And the stockade was substantially wider than that. We had about a 50-foot perimeter around that. There were 2 large fire pits on the end of the outside of the house, and there was one inside. That was one of the highlights of our hunting career. Another time, Winter's Church Road. We were going across the railroad track. My father hadn't been there for a while, and he had just come from a seminar, or I guess kind of like a seminar, about Indian artifacts up in Pennsylvania. He looks across the railroad track, and there's a big sycamore tree that came out like this, and was bent down and went straight up. He said, there's an Indian. The way it points, he says, where the Indian camp was. He looked at it, there's an Indian camp over there. We went over there. He knew the fellow that owned the field. Went over to see him, talked to him, got permission to hunt. We found arrowheads. The Indians would make trail markers that would show where the camp was. So that if you were in a blizzard or something like that, bad weather or dark, whatever, and almost all of them were sycamores, because you have white bark, shine out all times. They would take a young tree, and they would go out, bend it down, and put a log over top of it, out about 16 or 20 feet, so the tree was bent down. Once that tree started to make a vertical shoot again, they would take that log off. And then you had this bent sign, and that was a road sign saying, that way's a village. So those are 2 highlights that we had when we were hunting arrowheads. But the other things, I have up here, I have the different points they had. I have some that go back into what they call the paleos, which were 10 to 15,000 BC, and then I have then come up to the modern area. Some of it's kind of strange. They're very, very early, before the paleos. Now they're finding the points. They're finding out that the sites that they're finding that are before the paleo, which was the Clovis points, the arrowheads were not of the quality. They were of a poorer quality. When the Clovis points came, and arrowheads became very, very good work of art, if you want to call them. A lot of very skilled stone craftsmen would make them. And then after that, in the last few hundred years, then again, the quality went down. Not really sure why. You'd think that the quality would stay up. Possibly their way of life was better, their standard of living was better, maybe they didn't have time put into it, maybe they didn't need to. Not real sure. Obviously various variables that made these things different. There are a very large number of styles here, and these weren't made from fashion or fad. Most likely they were made for convenience and also for practicality and for what they were hunting. So if they had whatever size animal they were hunting or whatever they needed to use the points for, they made them to fit. So there's different, you see different styles of the bases, you see different styles of the form, the arrowhead itself, and they were all basically just of different times, and lots of them came from different areas, and they felt that they were mainly like this tribe used this style, and maybe it was like a marker. It was very important in the Indian society, your family, your tribe was everything, and so you were very big on keeping your identification with that. So it's possible that they did that. Again, I'm an amateur, I'm speculating on some of these things and some things that I've read, but they do seem to have moved around. You find one style, the same style in one area, according to the archaeologist, and then they would eventually go out in another area. So it's either, for some reason or other, the tribe expanded, or whatever they're hunting, the technology from the other tribes looked over and said, hey, what you've got's a good idea, we're going to pattern after it. There was that. I brought up some bird points. There, one camp that